It's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight, and for us to spend a little bit of time together. Before I get started, I just want to talk about how much of Arthur's work resonates. This is my first time hearing Arthur read. But one of the things that I love about such readings is the pairing. When it happens, the universe takes over and just says, I'm gonna put these two individuals together and I'm gonna have their work speak to one another. So a lot of what I'm going to cover echo a little bit of what Arthur is talking about, but in terms of numbers, that's what stuck out with me here, right? We remember people by numbers, and a lot of the folks addressed in this collection, remember them by slogans or taglines or protest chants and so forth. And so we don't get to know them on micro level. And so the goal of this collection is to shed some light on that. But before I get started, I just want to thank Black Lawrence Press, because when My Body Was a Clenched Fist was picked up during the open reading, it just changed everything for me. Because as writers, we just want someone to believe, right? Like, we know we can write, we know we can do the work, and all it takes is somebody to believe. And Black Lawrence did, and I can't thank Diane enough for her, not just for her vision, more importantly, her heart. A lot of what we do here is heartfelt, and we need other heart people to be a part of that journey. So I just wanted to say that before we get started. So sorry if you're blushing, Diane, but I need to sing a lot of your praises. We spent a lot of time talking, especially with this manuscript and its timing. So, and to get us started tonight, though, I would like us to take a collective breath together. I'm the main character, played grandiose between two choric songs of tragedy and broadcast live. This is an epigraph in the book from a collection by the poet Erica Dawson. American Scapegoat is an American narrative being seen through Black lenses. It is partly the story of a young and Black immigrant boy who survives the hardships of his native country and his childhood, which is featured in When My Body Was a Clenched Fist. And he grows up to be a man. He finds that the world is still not a safe place for him to be, especially in his body. And he finds himself at place in a democracy at war with itself and its humanity. Now, this threat continues to exist on a daily basis. As such, the poems here, they interrogate the American experience and highlight where we actually deviate from the promise of democracy, while showcasing the lack of humane treatment and decency for Black lives. At the end of the day, this American Scapegoat is appealing to the humanity in all of us. And that's what I hope the collection will do. I'll be reading a few poems at a time and then pausing to take a collective breath again. And then I'll end with a few more poems. But there's no better place for us to start really than conditions that seem to be unavoidable. And a lot of these are man-made. And some of them are natural. But what happens when situations that are man-made are deemed natural? And all of a sudden we find ourselves in the condition that a number of the folks in this collection find themselves in, including myself. And I have to put on my reading glasses. I always make the mistake of not doing that, and I end up squinting. But I'll be reading Weather, an American Libretto, which is on page 19, if you're following. Then Grey's Anatomy, which is on page 27. And then In Defense of My Body's Dissertation, and then When Night Fills with Premature Exit. So, and I'm gonna read them in sequence because that's the way all of this story works. And so I'll start with Weather, which I mentioned is on page 19. Whether or not you believe in whether it will happen to you, will find you without warning. It doesn't care. Whether or not it hurts is of no consequence, nor a building or levees collapse, or the trees, the wind, and nature's fury. A mother country with no deal to be made and with no care about whether or not you have been under the weight of an already murderous reign, and that your life regiment is regimes doesn't matter. Whether or not despots have already marked these spots with death, the earth rumbled and crumbled huts and monuments alike like it didn't matter. Whether or not we made a living out of the sum of dirt underneath our fingernails, or that it paled in comparison to the flamboyant trees retreat out of reach, or whether or not we were heard, or that our mystery was misread, or that we believed despite being misled, or that we were the orphans of a republic that is both bullet and barrel, spitting our carapace like a cell splits the body into hemospheres, both air and trumpet, spitting our chords into a memo read like an omen, spitting our chords into particles and articles of refuse. We matter like bones matter in a slum, like leathery skin in the summer sun, or like the sum of a skillful gun that knows whether we moan or not, our absences will never trump the lower breath snuffing us out. Doesn't matter whether we quit these lipped hours in the perpetual sweat, or that we quit that dumb other that prowls, that winter that mellows our minds with our hesitation, the adage that keeping it real is dicing our breath on the defiant air, courting wreckage, and it's worth it. Doesn't matter whether we quit that dumb other without deliberation, the benches peeled with bygone bullets under the duress of flight, the syphilitic revolvers that render the block cold as mines, whether we pay respects, our respects in the thug air of a mean retreat, bereft of days, bereft of nights, when we quit that dumb other that says, some are born to smile. Doesn't matter whether we quit the trap that rendered us neutral, noise which crows all correction is connection, the obligatory dictation in our mouths, exalting us for our tribe lingual amputations, that pillage choice, that pad boomed our voice. Whether or not we quit noise which gleans all things correctional as correction, that thing which causes us to hone moan as anthem, grown so long we mime life, backslash black, this what we did before hypomnesia, memory gone so long we homegrown, or whether or not we quit that unmistakably labored tone, the umbilical hazing of our sanctuaries, or whether many of us drew dirt prematurely, or a genealogy of deficit that begot too many names we will never get to know by heart, doesn't matter. Whether we're still standing and free, our mouths deciphering the saline of tears from all other salty liquids, the master of our own hope and despair, and reciting a hello grin as we wait in the science of goodbye, to pry that exilic snowflake from the barrel of our throat. We've always known we matter like heartbeats in a drub, like the sum of a skillful gun that knows whether we hone, moan, groan, our absences will never trump the lower breath snuffing us out. A bleat is heard from the vacuum of erasure. Imagine a tin-can semi-erratic clan as it is transported without restraint in the back of an empty loaded truck. Imagine a rag doll, or the fling of a mop's flop, or a rogue freshly peeled honeydew melon at the mercy of the groove floor bed of a truck. Imagine a shell-less soft-boiled egg, or a baked sweet potato rolling off the makeshift counter of a bench. Imagine it being tossed in the truck like it is born of a Dunsack nation. Imagine it has ears and can hear itself crack open. Imagine you can hear it crack open in the back of a truck, and it sounds like a tea kettle whistle. Imagine it is the sound the throat makes when it has broken away from its voice box. Imagine a man attached to the voice and the throat and the sound of a cry that sounds like something has cracked open. And imagine he tosses haplessly in that metal truck and nobody gives a fuck, not the driver of the truck, how the man's body fell to flutter to the ground as he lost consciousness, how the clanging of cuffs were one of the last sounds he heard, and how his gut may have felt when he entered the back of that truck. He was on the verge of being relegated to compost. In defense of my body's dissertation, I know the distance between all bodies of matter in the solar system is an astronomical unit, or AU, which means all dark space in space is measured in spans too immense to grasp. Yet light travels within such spaces. It takes 499 seconds for light to travel from the sun to Earth, one astronomical unit for light to travel between two dense distances and be seen, which means the distance between a hand and a gun is measured by how fast light travels between two human beings orbiting the same block. On the one hand, this means there isn't a way to tell the difference between a known or rogue planet wandering the cosmos without stars to make suspect out of them or gun out of a wallet, an asteroid to be blasted from the sky. Look, I'm not saying I know how the body knows when it's being sized up for plunder, braving the shelling of smuggled smug smiles every day and still finds a way to squeeze into a slightly snug pair of sweatpants and t-shirt at day's end, to trick the skin into comfort when all it wants to do is recount the headlines one by one and the bygones, slug, slug, slug. Tell me, is there a place where Black men can go to be beautiful? Is there light there, touch? Is there comfort or room to raise their Black sons as anything than a future asterisk, at risk to be asteroid or rogue planet but not comet, to be studied with awe and clamor and admired for radial trajectories across a dark sky made of asphalt and moonshine, to be celebs and deemed a magnificent sight? Collective breath. Once I was asked, why don't I write happy poems? So like a typical poet, I wrote a poem in response to that question. And it is a poem titled American Testimony, which is on page 51 in the book. I wish I could write about bees and collapsed colonies, about a young child frolicking through fields of withered posies in search of something whole and tender, with their heads held down and crying about the promise of all that is unseen. I wish this could be a verse about extinction and preventing lions and other wildcats from meeting the fate of a rifle's aim, and about how a broken tooth will always remind me of Cecil, whose murder caused a nation to hold his head down and cry. I wish I were writing about a beach whale or a pack of sea lions who mistook the sand for stardust or heavenly grounds, and how a village of strangers nursed and ushered them back to the sea, watching arm on shoulder and heads down, crying. I wish what is written was about a rare moth that once made a dilapidated shack its home, and how it was spared minutes before demolition, and how it was the man who built the shack that discovered it, and how he held his head down and cried. Instead, I am writing in hope that you will care about my early demise, enough to be moved by how often I find myself on knees and wailing under dilapidated sun, and how your head is often constantly held down, so you don't ever have to see me die. In writing this book, I really wanted to address the conflict between Black lives and all lives. We heard the chants. People kept insisting that all lives mattered. That's true. But saying Black Lives Matter doesn't negate the fact that all lives matter, but there was something that continues to happen to Black lives in America, and it's been happening to centuries, that people keep denying, and we need to address that. We need to address it because some of us keep dying. And we are all talking about a kill shot, not fake bruises or a feline musing on a fake-tailed mouse. In a real house filled with windows, wide enough to see through, no shades or barricade, just lemonade. Not on the stand, but in the veins from being once interrogated ad nauseum without charges. Understand, there's no way of knowing how sweet from that distance, you say. It must be close enough to be a cup or a mouth or a cop musing as both. So you tell yourself, if only I were a cup or a cop in that room. If only I were able to take a sip, to know for sure how one winds up killed dead in custody. The numbers are the numbers, and we can't shake that. As a father, as a man, I had to face my own fears, and I said, there's no way that I can stomach this or carry it on my own. So I put it in the poem, In the Country of Chagrins and Mortuary, which is on page 43. Every day I wake up and get dressed for my own funeral and glance at the dead man arrayed in the mirror like a clock. And the distance between rooms try to reconcile the news. And tying my shoes with a pair of trigger fingers feels like this is it, what an omen would yield if it were a member of the body. And this body is not as beautiful as the bodies from where you're from, because this body isn't beautifully bodied where you're from, though this body is more beauty embodied where I am from. And being best dressed in a pleasant smile does not mean I won't meet the worst of the world's finest assassins. And it won't mean a proud car isn't rehearsal for a hearse. And it won't mean I will know what to make of screaming white boys in cars in their bodies, bungling in and out of bars, who often tell the police to fuck off and live and brag, and habitually wake solely in the custody of a hangover. I want to conclude with how to craft an American scapegoat, because a lot of times we think this is by accident. But this is where it's good to know that a group of goats is called a tribe. And I often think about it's a lot easier to categorize someone as different and to shape them as if we're not part of the same tribe. How did that happen? Well, nothing is by accident. Someone made a deliberate decision, and we are still feeling its effect. So I want to conclude with this poem, How to Craft an American Scapegoat. Make him a young boy in a project yard. Make his pants sag like a deferred dream. Make his mama, not his real mama, his daddy, ghost. Fill his eyes and mouth with bias. So he resembles a child, not like your child, but one blood-born and raised in a dung sack nation. Make his hands rebel against the Union by putting a pistol in his hands. Christen him militant or desperado, someone who preys on his neighbors, brothers, sisters, and friends, as the reaper who wants the chances that you took. Make him an aftermath or compilation of fraud, dead things. Make his house one created dangerously with memories and hearsay about huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Poster him the tired poor, a colossus of ails and depredation. Make him Lazarus. Make him Black. Thank you so much.